What's up, everybody, and welcome in to another edition of the Sit Down. As always, if you enjoy this video, make sure you hit the like button and let me know what you think in the comment section below. Also, if you're new around here, you just haven't done it yet, or you're living under a rock, I don't know what you're waiting for. Like everybody else, hit that subscribe button now so you never miss another sit down video. Today, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to take another look at another mafia topic, and we get an interesting one today. We are going to talk about the life and times of an individual named Anthony Aiello. Aiello would come up on the streets of Queens. His drug dealer father would head to prison, and he would be on his own. He would be schooled by mobsters, run with a violent drug crew, and ultimately be in charge of a pretty high profile murder that would ultimately lead him in prison for a long time. The story of Anthony Aiello next on Sit Down Shorts. Anthony Aiello was born in 1976 in Queens, New York. Interestingly enough, he was from Middle Village and he would live at Fresh Pond Road. If you know anything about Ridgewood, Middle Village, it has been a long time haven for the Bonanno crime family and members of the Colombo crime family. Interestingly enough, Anthony Aiello's father, Antonino, would actually come over to the United States in the 70s, and he would set up a pretty successful business for himself. He was a owner of not one, not two, not three, but four pizzerias surrounding Brooklyn, Queens, and in Harlem. He also owned a cafe in Queens called Cafe Aiello. There was one interesting tidbit, though, about Antonino Aiello. According to the federal government, he was a large-scale drug trafficker. And as many know, in the 70s and 80s, pizzerias were used as fronts for selling and moving heroin. And in 1984, Rudy Giuliani and the feds would bring an indictment against Antonino Aiello, claiming that over a 5-year period, they would sell and move over 300 pounds of heroin and cocaine. Now, the good news for Aiello was he found out about this indictment and went on the lam. The problem for Aiello's family was some of them were hemmed up as well, including his father, Vito Aiello, who during a raid was caught with hundreds of thousands of dollars as well as drugs and guns he was holding for his son. That little piece of work would get him 8 months in federal prison for being a part of the conspiracy. Aiello would be on the run for about 2 years and would be arrested in 1986 alongside his wife, Betty, who would also get hit with harboring a fugitive and get 3 years probation. So Aiello's father and mother and family were very much hemmed up in a pretty crazy conspiracy. A lot of the drugs were run out of a place in Harlem at 164 West 125th Street called Tony's Pizza Parlor. That was one of the pizzerias that the older Aiello had. So in 1986, the young Aiello is about 9 years old. His father gets hit with life in prison. And to this day, his father still sits at USP Hazleton. He is 83 years old. Let's get to young Aiello, though. And he would grow up basically without his father. He was a young kid, and for certain parts of his life, according to Gangland News, he did try to hold legitimate work. He at one point worked at a bagel shop and was just like any other kid, hobnobbing around Glendale and Ridgewood looking for girls. But there was a bad part of Ridgewood, and that was the fact that there were mobsters and sons of mobsters and cousins of mobsters and young kids who wanted to follow in the footsteps of their family. And a lot of young Italians in Ridgewood, Queens, would have that fate. They would form a crew called the Cafe Giannini crew that was based out of Cafe Giannini in Middle Village, Queens, that was run by longtime Sicilian Zip Baldo Amato. And according to Frank Fortolino, who I've spoke to many times about his life as an associate in the Bonanno crime family, he ran with Cafe Giannini. He would tell me that Anthony Aiello was one of the toughest kids he had ever encountered. And they actually lived 2 doors away from each other on Fresh Pond Road. He would talk about that when they were kids. They were all pretty much schooled by people like Baldo Amato, Bobby Glasses Vernays, Vito Grimaldi. These guys were schooling these young kids and really creating a spot for them to become whatever they wanted in a mob family. Now, young Aiello would get his start robbing people. He started doing burglaries and armed robberies. He would actually get jammed up in 1997 for the first time. He would head to prison on a 39-month bid for armed robbery. Now, by this point in the late 90s, Cafe Giannini the kids were either locked up or became informants. And some did, some didn't. Now, Frank Fortolino, who I mentioned, did eventually become an informant, but that wouldn't come until the 2000s. People like Paul Ragusa, Vito Guzzo, who were higher ups in Cafe Giannini, would ultimately go to prison. And some of the remnants were still out there. And when Aiello got out of prison in 2001, he would head right back to the streets and look for his initiation back in. He had, according to himself, proven himself to members of different families. And this is where a new heavyweight comes in. Also, as we know, by this point in the early 2000s, Big Joey Messino is arrested and goes to prison. That would succeed control to Vincent Basciano. Basciano was a Bronx heavyweight who would ultimately take control of the family. As we know, though, many good high-end guys are always looking for good people around them. And some of the remnants of the Cafe Giannini crew would kind of anchor in under Basciano. These two would meet, Aiello and Basciano. And Basciano would ultimately start asking around about Aiello. Aiello started passing the test, and he would get his button at some point as well. Fast forward to 2004. Basciano is having to deal with an individual in the family, an associate called Randolph Pozzola. According to Basciano, and this would be uncovered in a tape conversation he had with Joey Messino, Pozzola was out of control. He was an associate who was starting to not kick up what he was supposed to kick up. He was kind of an annoying kid, according to him. That's what Basciano was saying. And, he needed to go, according to Basciano, who was now the boss of the family. In 2004, on the rain-soaked street of Monitor in Greenpoint, Brooklyn, a body would turn up on December 1st, 2004. Seen in the picture is a black BMW. That is Pozzola's BMW, and that is Pozzola laying on the ground. He had been warned, you probably want to get out of here. They're looking for you. Pozzola didn't end up leaving, and he was killed. The question was, who killed Randolph Pozzola? And we wouldn't actually find out until something crazy would happen in the Bonanno crime family. In 2004, the feds would flip Joey Messino, as we know, and he would become a government informant. The government says to him, though, hey, wait a second. Why don't we wire you up and throw you back into MDC, and we can get you to start getting Basciano on tape? Because by this point, Joey Messino was still regarded as the boss of the family. So secretly, he's thrown back into population, and they get some very incriminating stuff involving Vincent Basciano. I want to go over some of the conversations that they had, one regarding Pozzola and one regarding a very powerful figure that we'll get to. Now, as Messino heads back into the belly of the beast, as they say, he would go up to Vincent Basciano in the yard and basically start asking him about Pozzola. Basciano would respond, quote, I gave the order. You want to know why? Because he's a fucking dangerous kid that didn't fucking listen. He talks stupid. He's just an annoying fucking kid. And that would be referring to Pozzola. Now, Pozzola had also, according to sources, stiffed Basciano out of a construction payoff that Basciano was owed. It seemed like he had just worn out his welcome as an associate in the Bonanno crime family. He would then go to an underling, this individual, Michael Mancuso, And he would tell him to tell Aiello to take out Pizzola, which Aiello would oblige in December of 2004. Now, I want to, before we get to what would ultimately happen to Aiello and everybody involved, I want to get to a pretty interesting conversation that Joey Massino would also have with Basciano. At some point, it is alleged that Basciano floated the idea of killing U.S. prosecutor Greg Andrews, which is a wild move. We had seen in the past, Carmen Persico wanted to kill a federal judge or an attorney. Like, this is something that's been floated, but it never actually happened. So Joey Massino tries to get something out um, of Basciano. According to Gangland News, Massino would walk up to Basciano and said, quote, "Remember when we spoke in the bullpen, you wanted to take that prosecutor out?" He would ask him, "What are we to gain by that? What are you going to gain if we take that prosecutor out?" Basciano would respond calmly, quote, "Nothing," quote, "Forget about it." He would then, minutes later, Massino try to implicate Gorgeous again by saying basically, "What's up with this prosecutor? Are you really going to do this? What do you have to gain?" Basciano would reply five separate times, "Forget about it. Let's not even discuss it again." Massino would say then, "I thought about it. I don't want to talk downstairs in the room there. What are we going to gain by hurting him? That don't make any sense. The more people that get hurt, the more heat is going to come down." Obviously, he gets through to Basciano. Basciano responds with, "Yeah, I know that." So it's conceivable to believe that Basciano was pretty much talked out of the ledge as to this wild idea to off Greg Andrews. Now, Greg Andrews is still alive. He was never dealt with, but Basciano had to deal with all this stuff. He would ultimately face a jury and would be found guilty. He is serving a life sentence in USP Atlanta the last time I checked. And as I know, his hair is still intact. One of the great hair games in the mob, Vincent Basciano. Now, back to our subject, Anthony Aiello. He would actually, upon learning in 2005 that Joey Massino was a rat, he would actually take a page out of his father's book and leave town. He would actually go on the run and be on the lam for a couple of years until 2007 when he was arrested. And he would have to go face the music on the murder of Randolph Pizzola. They had some incriminating evidence against him. He would ultimately admit that he was the gunman and take a plea deal in that case. The man they called Ace, who Vincent Basciano once called his Luca Brasi, Anthony Aiello was given 30 years in federal prison. Now, one other note, Michael the Nose Mancuso, in his participation in this crime, actually took a plea deal as well. He was facing life in prison, but got a sweet plea deal of 15 years. According to the federal government, he allegedly is still around and is a high up in the Bonanno crime family. That is what they say. Nothing that I say. That is what they say. Aiello is still in prison, and he is eligible for release in 2030, where he will be, a young spring member of the mob still. No question as to what he's doing now. I have no idea. Who knows what he'll end up doing? He sits at Fort Dix in New Jersey. He's got about 8 years left on his sentence. When we look back on the life of mobsters in the 2000s, we don't talk much about the remnants of the Giannini crew. We don't talk much about Cafe Giannini crew in general, but the truth of the matter is they're one of the most dangerous farm groups affiliated with the mob. They were, according to the New York Daily News, a scourge of Western Queens. And eventually, guys like Vito Guzzo, Paul Ragusa, Anthony Aiello are going to get out of prison. The question is, what will they do now? An interesting group of guys, nonetheless. As always, thank you for watching, and I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, make sure you hit the like and make sure you subscribe. As always, I am Jeff Nadu. See you next time.